Martin worked at the Interspecies Academy as a simple janitor. Most people did not notice him. Students walked past him without looking. Teachers only spoke to him when they needed something cleaned. He did not mind. He liked quiet halls and empty classrooms. He liked finishing his work in peace. One late afternoon, when the sky outside was turning orange, Martin pushed his cleaning cart down the long hallway near the storage rooms. He hummed softly to himself as he swept the floor. As he reached the supply cupboard, he heard a strange sound. It was a tiny growl, then a soft chirp, then something like a sneeze mixed with a spark. Martin froze. He looked around. The hallway was empty. The sound came again, quieter this time. He leaned down and carefully opened the bottom door of the cupboard. Inside, two small creatures stared back at him. They had bright eyes, tiny wings, and little horns that looked too heavy for their heads. Their scales shimmered like new metal, and their long tails wrapped nervously around themselves. They were baby dragons, no bigger than cats. Martin blinked. The hatchlings blinked back. One of them let out a weak chirp, like it was calling for help. Martin slowly crouched. He had cleaned the academy for years, but he had never seen dragon hatchlings up close. Dragon parents were protective. They never let their young stray far. Seeing two babies alone made him worry. "Hey there," he whispered. "Are you two lost?" They only stared at him with big, hungry eyes. Their bellies made small rumbling sounds. Martin sighed and reached into his pocket. He had only one thing with him, his simple lunch, just a half sandwich with cheese and greens. It was not much, but the babies looked so hungry that he did not think twice. He broke the sandwich into pieces and held them out. One hatchling sniffed the food carefully. Then, as if deciding Martin was not dangerous, it took a small bite. The other baby followed. Within moments, they were eating fast, crumbs falling onto the floor. Martin could not help smiling. They were cute. Dangerous someday, maybe, but cute now. He watched as the hatchlings finished the food and licked their tiny claws clean. Then, to his surprise, they stumbled toward him. One climbed onto his boot. The other tried to climb his leg, but kept slipping. Martin gently picked them up, holding them in his palms. They chirped happily, as if they had found someone safe. "You two should not be here," he said softly. "Your mother will worry." He looked around again. No adult dragon. No ambassador. No guards. No one at all. It was strange. Dragon families lived in the forest mountains behind the academy. They did not usually wander into the school. Martin carried the babies outside toward the back courtyard. He hoped to find a dragon handler, or at least someone who knew what to do. But the courtyard was empty, too. Only the soft wind touched the grass. The hatchlings looked around and chirped again, this time louder. Martin felt a little panic rise in his chest. What if they kept making noise? What if the mother came looking? What if she thought he had taken them? He set them gently on the ground. "All right, little ones," he said. "You should head home now. Go on. Shoo." But the babies only pressed against his boot again, refusing to move. Martin sighed. Of course they would not listen. They were too young, too hungry, and too lost. He knelt down and stroked their small heads. The scales were smooth and warm under his fingers. "You need to go back to the forest," he said softly. "Your mother will find you there. Trust me." He pointed toward the tree line. The hatchlings looked at him, then toward the forest, then back at him. After a moment, one of them let out a tiny warble and began waddling toward the trees. The other followed slowly. Martin watched until they disappeared behind the bushes. He let out a long breath. He hoped they found their family. He hoped he had done the right thing. The sky was darker now. Stars were starting to appear. Martin put his hands on his hips and nodded to himself. "Well," he murmured, "that was strange." He turned back toward the academy and finished his cleaning rounds. By the time he locked up the last classroom, he had almost convinced himself the whole thing had been a small, strange moment that would never matter again. But early the next morning, when he walked through the courtyard with his mop and bucket, the ground trembled beneath his feet. At first he thought it was thunder. Then he heard the deep, echoing beat of enormous wings. Students screamed. Teachers ran for cover. Alarms blared. Martin looked up. A giant shadow was falling over the school. Something huge was landing, and Martin already knew who it was coming for. The moment the shadow covered the courtyard, every student froze where they stood. The sky darkened as something enormous landed behind the academy. Dust rose in a thick cloud. The ground shook again, harder this time, as if a mountain had decided to move on its own. Martin slowly turned around, his mop still dripping water onto the tiles. A dragon, full-grown, ancient, and massive, stood at the far end of the yard. Her wings spread wider than the roof of the school. Her scales shone like burning gold when sunlight hit them. Her eyes, sharp and bright, scanned the entire campus in one slow sweep. She was easily the size of 3 school buildings. Students screamed and ran inside. Teachers pushed them toward safety. Alarms continued to ring. Security bots rolled out, flashing red warnings, but none went near her. They stopped many meters away, unable to calculate a safe response. Martin did not move. He could not. The great dragon's chest rumbled with a deep growl that shook the ground again. She lowered her head toward the courtyard and sniffed the air. Her nostrils flared. The sound echoed like thunder. She smelled something. Martin swallowed. He understood almost immediately. She was following the scent of the 2 hatchlings, and that scent led directly to him. Before he could think, the bushes near the forest edge rustled. 2 small shapes tumbled out, the same baby dragons from the day before. They chirped excitedly and ran straight toward him. Martin's eyes widened. No, 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 go back. Not to me. But it was too late. The hatchlings reached him and sat right by his boots, tiny tails wrapping around his feet, like they belonged there. The giant dragon raised her head sharply. Her golden eyes locked onto Martin. The courtyard became silent. Even the alarm seemed quieter. Martin felt his mouth go dry. He did not run. He knew running would make things worse. Instead, he raised his hand slowly and tried his best to stay calm. Hello, he whispered, though she was too far to hear him. The great dragon took one heavy step forward. The tiles cracked under her weight. Another step, and the air trembled. She leaned her enormous head closer, her jaw swinging open slightly as she sniffed again. A warm gust of air hit Martin, like a strong wind. He stood frozen. His legs felt like stone. The hatchlings chirped again and pressed closer to him, as if proudly showing him off. The mother dragon lowered her head fully now, her huge eye nearly the size of Martin's whole body. She stared at him, unblinking, studying every detail to scent his clothes, his face, everything. Martin felt incredibly small. A single wrong move could end him. But then something unexpected happened. The mother dragon huffed softly, almost a sigh. Not anger, not rage. Something else. Recognition. She looked at the 2 babies. Then at Martin again. She lowered her snout until it almost touched the ground. The hatchlings climbed onto her nose, chirping loudly as if telling her a long story. Martin watched them, confused. They tapped at her scales, then pointed their little heads toward him. It was almost like they were explaining what had happened. The mother dragon listened. Dragons did not use words like humans did, but they understood gestures, sensed memories, emotions. The hatchlings seemed to be showing her he had helped them. The giant dragon raised her head slowly, and this time she did not growl. Instead, she let out a low rumble, a soft one, like distant thunder, but gentle. Martin took a shaky breath of relief. Still, the dragon stepped forward again, closing the distance until her head hovered directly above him. Students peeking from windows held their breath. Teachers watched in horror. Security bots shut down entirely, unable to classify what was happening. Martin stood still, staring up at her. He whispered, "I'm not here to hurt them." She lowered one huge claw toward him. He tensed, but the claw did not strike. Instead, she carefully tapped the ground beside him. A greeting, a thank you, a request for trust. Martin blinked. He could barely understand how something so huge was being so gentle with him. "You're welcome," he whispered, unsure she understood. The hatchlings crawled down for her snout again and climbed onto Martin's shoe like it was a safe little platform. They chirped happily at him. The mother dragon's eyes softened. Then she lifted her head, turned toward the sky, and let out a loud, echoing roar. Not a roar of anger, but a call, a signal, a message that shook the air. She spread her wings, covering the courtyard in shade once more. Everyone thought she would take off, but she didn't. Instead, she stepped back, sat down like a great mountain resting, and placed the hatchlings between herself and Martin. She was presenting them to him. Martin's heart thudded. She trusted him with her children, and everyone watching realized what the mother dragon already knew. This simple human janitor had done something no warrior, scholar, or diplomat ever had. He had been kind to her babies, and she would not forget it. Martin did not understand what was happening at first. He only knew that the giant mother dragon was not leaving. The school alarms had stopped, and the hatchlings were now happily climbing up his leg, like he was their personal tree. Students watched from windows with wide, fearful eyes. Teachers whispered in shaky voices. No one dared step outside. But the mother dragon stayed calm. She sat like a golden mountain, wings folded, eyes focused on Martin with a strange, ancient seriousness. Her tail wrapped around the courtyard like a protective wall. Martin took a careful breath. I still don't know what you want from me. The dragon blinked slowly, as if she understood. Then she lowered her head again. Her long horn tapped gently on the ground right beside him, forming a triangle around him and the hatchlings. Something about the gesture felt old, important. Martin felt a chill in the air, not from cold, but from something else, like the world itself was paying attention. A small group of science officers finally arrived, carrying scanners and protective shields. But even they stayed far back. One of them whispered, "She's performing a rite, not an attack." Martin frowned. A rite? Another officer nodded nervously. Dragon cultures follow old laws. Very old. If a human saves their young, it creates a bond, a debt, a promise that must be answered. Martin's throat went dry. A debt? The mother dragon let out a low, deep rumble that made the ground vibrate. She reached out again, this time touching the hatchlings' heads with her claws, then pointed her snout toward Martin. Everyone stared. One officer breathed, "She's declaring him a guardian." Martin nearly dropped his mop. "A what?" The dragon blinked again. Her giant eyes softened, but her voice, if the deep rumbling sound counts as a voice, was firm. She tapped her chest with one claw, then tapped the ground beside Martin again. A promise, a vow, a bond sealed by her presence. The officer stepped back in shock. It's ancient dragon law. If a child eats a human's food, especially willingly, and a human shares it without fear, the dragon family owes a human protection for life. Martin stared at the hatchlings, who chirped proudly at him as if showing off their new guardian. He laughed nervously. "I gave them half a sandwich." "That's it." The great mother huffed loudly, as if disagreeing. Her breath rushed over him in a warm wave. She gently nudged him with her snout. Martin stumbled back 2 steps. She wanted him to accept the honor, or at least understand it. But Martin felt very confused. "I'm just a janitor. I clean floors. I fix light bulbs. I'm not a guardian of anything." The mother dragon tilted her head, studying him. Then she pressed one giant claw to the ground and carved a symbol into the broken tiles. The symbol glowed faintly, golden and warm. Everyone gasped. "That's a mark," one officer whispered. "A dragon law seal." The symbol represented 2 hatchlings and a human standing between them, a protector. Martin rubbed his face with both hands. "Oh boy, this is too big for me." But the hatchlings chirped loudly, climbed onto his shoes again, and looked up at him with bright, trusting eyes. They didn't care about ancient laws or grand traditions. They just remembered the man who fed them when they were hungry and scared. The mother dragon saw this and lowered her head once more. She nudged the mark on the ground toward him, insisting gently. Martin sighed. "You're not going to leave until I agree, are you?" The dragon blinked, slowly, meaning no. He took a long breath and nodded. "Fine. I'll try. I'll do my best to look out for them. But no biting people or burning the school, okay?" The hatchlings chirped loudly, almost like laughter. The mother dragon let out a satisfied rumble. Then she lifted her head high into the sky and released a roar that echoed across the mountains. It was not a threat. It was an announcement, a declaration. A human had been accepted into dragon law. A bond had been formed. All the windows of the school shook. Birds fled the trees. Clouds trembled around the peaks. Martin covered his ears. I hope that means thank you. The mother dragon spread her gigantic wings. With a powerful flap, the courtyard wind hit everyone like a burst from a jet engine. Dust and leaves flew everywhere. Students shouted and ducked behind desks. She took off into the sky with the force of storm. Her golden body lifted higher and higher until she was only a shining out above the clouds. The hatchlings watched her go, then turned back toward Martin as if expecting him to do something. He stared at them. What? You want me to take you inside? They chirped. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Okay, but no fire, and no biting, and no eating lost homework. He picked up his mop and walked toward the school doors. The baby dragons followed him happily, their tails swishing behind them, and everyone watching realized the same thing. The ancient laws of dragons had chosen a simple school janitor, and now, whether he wanted it or not, Martin carried a dragon debt older than any human history. Martin never wanted to be a hero. He only wanted to sweep floors, fix broken lockers, and enjoy a quiet lunch in the staff room. But ever since the two baby dragons began following him everywhere, quiet was impossible. Students watched them with wide eyes. Teachers whispered in confused voices. And every government nearby wanted answers. For a few days, things stayed calm. The hatchlings slept in the gym like giant, scaly puppies, curled beside Martin's mop bucket. They followed him as he worked, chirping and bumping his leg whenever they wanted attention. Martin was slowly getting used to them. But trouble was rising beyond the school walls. News spread that the mountain-sized mother dragon had formed a dragon law bond with a human. Other alien governments protested. Some species saw the bond as dangerous. Others feared what it meant. And a few angry groups believed the dragons were planning to choose humans over the rest of the galaxy. Ships gathered in orbit. Warnings were sent. Arguments became threats. A war was forming. Martin had no idea until he stepped outside for his morning break and saw a row of military officers waiting for him. One officer cleared his throat nervously. Martin, the dragons are being blamed for everything. The Mountain Mother is approaching Earth again. Other fleets are preparing weapons. They think she is coming to attack. Martin stared at the officer, then at the hatchlings climbing his legs. Attack? She's probably coming to check on her kids. That's the problem, the officer whispered. They think she's bringing an army. A deep rumble echoed across the sky. Everyone froze. A shadow covered the school. The mother dragon returned, larger and more powerful than anyone remembered. Her wings stretched across the clouds. Her roar shook the ground like thunder. And behind her flew 6 more dragons, her kin, her guardians, her pride. Students screamed. Teachers ran inside. Soldiers raised shields and prepared a fire. Martin dropped his mop. No, 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 everyone stop. But no one listened. They were too scared. The mother dragon landed with a sound like an earthquake. Her kin circled the school, their eyes bright with warning. The soldiers pointed their weapons at the dragons. The dragons growled in return. One mistake would start a war. Martin forced his shaking legs to move. He stepped past the soldiers. He stepped past the hatchlings. He walked forward until he stood in front of the giant mother dragon. Even though her shadow made him feel like a tiny grain of sand, the dragon lowered her head. Her golden eyes softened when she saw him. Martin raised both hands. They're scared. You need to calm down. Please. The mother dragon rumbled gently. She nudged the hatchlings with her snout, showing she meant no harm. But the soldiers still trembled. The ships in the sky glowed with ready weapons. Everything was too close to disaster. Martin turned to the officers. She's not here to fight. She's here because her children chose me. She's keeping her promise. The officers swallowed hard. You have to make her prove it, Martin, or the fleets will fire. Martin looked up at the enormous dragon. Listen, if you roar again or move too quickly, someone up there is going to panic, and they will shoot. Please, you have to trust me." The dragon blinked slowly, trusting him. Then she did something no one expected. She lowered herself to the ground fully, folding her wings and lowering her neck until her head touched the dirt. A bow, a gesture of peace. Her kin followed her movement, lowering their heads beside her. The entire group of dragons showed surrender, not to the soldiers, but to Martin. A gasp went through the crowd. The officer's voice shook. "Martin, she's bowing to you." Martin didn't feel powerful. He didn't feel brave. He felt like a man who still had a half-eaten sandwich in his pocket and a mop leaning against a wall somewhere. But he walked forward anyway. He placed his hand gently on the mother dragon's nose. "She's saying peace," he said softly. The hatchlings chirped happily. The kin dragons hummed. The air slowly changed. Soldiers lowered their weapons. The sky fleets powered down. The entire world watched as a simple school janitor stood between two sides ready for battle, and ended the war with nothing but kindness and trust. The officer whispered, "How did you do that?" Martin let out a tired laugh. "I fed their kids. That's all." The mother dragon raised her head and placed one claw gently on the ground beside him. It was a gesture of honor, respect, recognition. Martin sighed. "Can everyone stop aiming weapons at my friends now?" Slowly, carefully, the military stood down. War had been avoided, not by power, not by armies, not by fear, but by one human who treated dragon children the way any good person would. Martin walked back toward the school, the hatchlings following him. The giant dragons remained for a moment longer, watching peacefully, then rose into the sky once more. As the clouds closed behind them, one truth settled over everyone. The janitor had not only cleaned halls, he had cleaned away the first sparks of a galaxy-wide war. Martin never thought his life would change after giving away half a sandwich. He never imagined dragons would bow to him, protect him, or trust him. But the biggest surprise came days after the peaceful standoff, when the mother dragon and her kin returned, not with anger, not with warning, but with purpose. The sky darkened again as the dragons arrived, but this time the world did not panic. Soldiers watched from a distance. Students whispered excitedly. The hatchlings bounced in circles when they saw Martin, chirping loudly with joy. The mother dragon landed gently outside the school. Her golden eyes were calm, filled with something soft and deep. She lowered her head close to Martin, and for the first time, she spoke in a voice all could hear. Not with words, but with a deep mental echo that reached every mind around her. "He is ours." The crowd trembled. Some people stepped back. Others stared, confused. A few muttered fears about kidnapping or ancient rituals. But Martin just sighed, wiping dust off his work shirt. "I'm not going anywhere," he said calmly. "I've got floors to mop." The mother dragon let out a warm, rumbling sound, almost a chuckle. She nudged him gently with her snout, pushing him back a step. The hatchlings rolled around his feet, grabbing his pant legs with their tiny claws. The kin dragon circled him in a protective ring. Then the mother dragon projected her voice again. "You fed our young. You protected them. You stopped war. For this, dragon law is clear. You are family." Martin blinked. "Family?" The officer beside him whispered. "Martin, I think they want to adopt you." Martin stared at the massive dragons surrounding him. "Adopt? I'm 36. I can barely take care of a mop." But the hatchlings climbed onto him, one clinging to his leg, and the other trying to sit on his shoulder. They growled happily, like proud little guardians. The mother dragon lifted her huge claw and placed it gently around her without touching, a circle of light and shadow. It felt safe. She continued, "Dragon can protect our own. You will never stand alone." The officer cleared his throat nervously. "Martin, this is a big deal. If a dragon clan adopts you, they claim you under ancient law. Any attack on you is an attack on them." Martin scratched his head. "Well, that's good, I guess. Does that mean I have to live in a volcano or something?" The officer shrugged. "No idea." The mother dragon lowered her head again. Her thoughts echoed softly. "You choose. Stay with humans. Visit us. Walk your own path. But you are kin. Martin felt a warmth in his chest. A simple man, a janitor, someone who thought his life was small, was suddenly being given a place in one of the oldest and strongest beings in the galaxy. He looked at the hatchlings. Their bright eyes shone with trust. They nuzzled his hands, chirping for attention. He remembered how hungry and cold they had been when he first found them. He remembered how natural it felt to help them. He smiled. All right, if you want me in your family, I'll accept. The mother dragon raised her head and released a roar, not a war cry, but a ceremonial one, ancient and powerful. Her kin joined her. The sound shook the mountains and rolled across the sky like thunder. But this time, the world wasn't afraid. This time, it sounded like welcome. The dragons moved closer, forming a half-circle around Martin. Light shimmered around them as the mother dragon tapped her claw to the ground. A symbol of glowing gold appeared under Martin's feet, a mark of dragon kinship. It rose like warm smoke, settling onto his skin, leaving a faint burn-shaped symbol on his arm. Martin stared at it. Great. Now I have a tattoo. My parents will be thrilled. The mother dragon rumbled in amusement. A few moments later, the dragons lifted their wings. They rose into the sky, but the hatchlings stayed behind, sitting beside Martin like loyal dogs who refused to leave their chosen human. The world watched, stunned. News was already spreading. Governments were rethinking alliances. Entire species were whispering about the human, who had been welcomed into one of the oldest dragon clans in the universe. But for Martin, nothing felt different. He looked down at the hatchlings. You too hungry? He asked. Both dragons chirped loudly. Martin reached into his pocket, pulled out a wrapped sandwich, and sighed. All right, but next time, we are buying proper dragon food. The hatchlings shoved their heads into his hands, happy and warm. As Martin walked back into the school with two baby dragons waddling behind him, something became clear to everyone who saw. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was a human adopted by dragons, and the galaxy would not forget it.